Welcome to Practical Shamanism. I'm Katie Weatherup. I'm a former engineer with 20 years of experience working as a shamanic practitioner, and I hope to help you to connect to your personal power and magic, and to support you in living a really good life that just keeps getting better. Thank you so much for joining me. One of the things that I'm super passionate about is helping energetically sensitive or psychically inclined or intuitive or spiritually inclined or people who have a real humanitarian spirit or a sense of the good of the world. There are different ways that these kind of things show up, but there's sort of a cluster, and it's a good chance if you're listening to a podcast called Practical Shamanism that at least some of the qualities that I think of fit. I'm really passionate about helping those people have success with money. Because often over the lifetimes where you were developing your humanitarian spirit or your desire to be of service to the whales or the planet, or developing your intuitive ability and your connection to source, you may not have been getting quite as good at the nitty-gritty of accumulating money in a level that provides a lot of security. For one thing, historically humans didn't necessarily have access to long-term security. Like hunter-gatherers couldn't put away food for retirement. It wouldn't stay good that long. So they were, investing in these communities that were ideally really strong and functional so that the younger people could take care of the older people and labor could still be divided. But there wasn't an availability to really have ongoing safety and security in these areas. And while nothing is ever 100%, I feel like there's an effectiveness and an opportunity to be the best version of yourself that is deeply supported by having a felt sense of safety at a material level. And for sure, there are all these narratives of people who, under adverse conditions, rose to great acts of nobility, who were hungry themselves and still sharing their food, who were, dealing with risks and still helping other people who are in need. And those are beautiful stories. I think that people, even when they're not completely well, who are still looking to help others is wonderful. But for peacetime, we're not talking about the Nazis invading and rounding up Jewish people. We're talking about the sort of everyday kind of thing, certainly political advocacy for people who aren't as safe in the world. Like I feel really good about donating to Amnesty International. I love the work that they do. So it's not to say we're not involved with those kind of things, but for modern everyday living, it's much more sustainable to fill your own cup before you go filling someone else's. And the sacrifice of your health or well-being in service to someone else's isn't all that sustainable. And these are complicated questions, so I don't mean to fully address them, but what I would like to offer is that there's a lot to be learned about how to support people who are inclined toward their upper chakras, who are heart-centered, who are visionary, who are connected to their soul purpose, in getting enough energy and in their energy bodies and skill in their everyday lives and attention on the question of having money work out and those kind of things in order to be really successful in the world, to really thrive. And so I have a lot of geekiness about the chakras, especially the lower chakras, and a lot of geekiness about how do we interface with money in a way that feels deeply aligned, because it's never going to feel good to an old soul with a deep sense of the well-being of everyone. Like, may we all be well is a deep, deep concern for me. And if I'm wealthy behind the castle walls and people outside the castle walls are starving, that's not going to feel good to me. So when I participate with money in the modern era, I want to do it with a grace, an opportunity to just kind of bounce this ball around. There's that kind of thing with a beach ball where people are like keeping it up in the air. Like, let's just bounce the money around joyfully so that everybody gets to participate and play and have enough and it flows. And, there's this beautiful energy of may we have win-wins with money, may it flow really well. And so there's a specific interface that is really different than the, as long as I'm winning, I don't care if people lose, versus, I really want win-wins. I want to have a grace and a higher expression of this. And I think that that's something that you can begin to sort of put attention on, and it gets some energy and some life moving. Because one of the things that I think happens a lot with money is we have repeated thoughts and feelings, and then our mind gets neurologically really locked into some perceptions that maybe are not on the side of what we would like to create. And knowing this, I actually have a program where 4 times a month, I do almost weekly journeys to work with the guides on money flow for myself and this group of people who've done soul retrievals with me in order to help the money flow, because I think it's complicated and nuanced. But the upshot of all of this is I've been taking a lot of counsel with the guides over a long period of time, looking at all these different elements of money success and how do we work with it, and how do we be in integrity and in spiritual and emotional and psychological health, but also really financially resourced. How do we have all of those at the same time? And obviously that's too big a topic to cover in just one podcast, but I want to share a little bit about working with the chakras and money. And one of the challenges is when money is under-resourced. For most people, it gets really loud. It ends up being on your mind a lot. It's something that you're thinking about a lot. It's something that you feel stuck and powerless around. And the opportunity is to start to kind of wrangle the money problem back to just being the money problem so that you're solving any other problems in your life at the same time. And one of the things that I think comes up for people when they're unhappy and stressed and struggling is they can flip right to, if I had more money, it would all be solved. People spend more on lottery tickets than they do on theater tickets and sporting events and books. And, it's crazy like how much the dream of being really wealthy, which is pretty much magical thinking because most people don't win the lottery, is more compelling than, going to a bookstore and buying a book on a concept that might improve your quality of life. And if you're listening to this, this probably doesn't represent you as well. I think demographic Venn diagram wise, there are a lot more people who are going to the bookstore because, it's a unique group of people who are called to listen to podcasts in general, and this one in particular. But it sort of speaks to something we may be able to find in ourselves of where if we have one kind of a problem, we can sort of move to, well, if money were better, it would be better. So if you're acutely lonely, sure, if you're working way too many hours, you might be less lonely. But if you're working with other people, there might be cool opportunities for human connection amid the coworkers that you have. And solving the money problem wouldn't solve the lonely problem. There are very wealthy people that I work with who are acutely, painfully lonely. And there could be a health problem that money wouldn't necessarily solve. It feels like you could get access to really great healthcare, but again, I know people who really struggle with their health who have access to a lot of financial resources. Sometimes the pain point is that, you're in the situation that they call the golden handcuffs, which means that you're successfully making so much money at a job that bores you that it's really hard to think of stepping away to do something else. And that's this kind of feeling like, you're trapped in that. So the soul purpose is really not being fulfilled. And then there's a feeling like there's never enough money. So one of the things that happens with our instincts when we're off center is if our instincts get loud, they don't have a concept of enough. So there could never be enough money if you feel unsafe in the world to go like, oh yeah, safety's taken care of. That's enough. We're good. I don't have to worry about that anymore. Enough is sort of an inside relationship to your instincts that gives you a pragmatic situation. Because again, I work with people with many, many different financial situations, and some people who you and I would probably really envy the amount of money that they have at their disposal feel perhaps more poverty-stricken than you or I. And so recognizing that, there's an opportunity to sort of check in with the different chakras and resolve their issues, or have a plan to resolve their issues that's independent of money. So then money can just do money, because I think that money gets burdened with happiness and fulfillment and connection and safety and all of these things that it can't really do. And then it's just not capable, and you're filling your field with all this other stuff related to money. So for success with money, it's really good to have a healthy root chakra. That's a great thing. It's super helpful if your instincts are calm. So if you have an anxiety issue, more money might solve it. For sure, it's helpful not to be in abject poverty for not having anxiety, but it's not the other way around. Like, plenty of money isn't going to resolve anxiety. It's a hair trigger fight or flight that we inherited from our hunter-gatherer ancestors because it helped keep them alive. And it's sort of the bane of modern people. Lots of people are in stress state all the time, even with plenty of money. And so if you calm the fight or flight response, you bring your resourcefulness and clear thinking online. So if you do have a genuine money problem, you'll be able to think clearly about it, to be able to work to solve it. So that's another piece of it. If you have good heart connections, your instincts are going to be calmer if you feel like you're connected to good people. So there are all these things that sort of factor in. And, third chakra, being respected, being seen, being known is really important to people. And that gets tied into money in a weird way. I had a really fun time doing this Science of Happiness course that was offered online for free that comes out of Yale. It was one of their most popular courses of all time. And there was a study that said about half the people, given the choice between making half as much money but making twice as much money as all of their coworkers versus twice the amount of money but that number that was double is half the amount of money that everyone else is making, would choose to have half the money as long as it was more than their coworkers. That's not everybody, but it sees that sense of status and being important could be so potent that people would have, a quarter of what they could have half the money versus double the money, like so much more money available if you take double instead of half. And yet the need to have the status thing was higher. So that's where the sense of self is getting really involved in a certain way. And again, that wasn't everyone in the study, but it was about half the people who would have made that choice, they thought. And sometimes I hear people really mushing together this idea of self-esteem. They're like, I have trouble getting paid what I'm worth, or I have trouble asking for what I'm worth. And sometimes that can be an instinct issue. I feel really vulnerable, so one of my strategies is people pleasing and avoiding getting a no. But our society is all weird about what it spends money on, what it doesn't. I love the arts. I love live theater. There's more money in making the latest gadget and software apps that people want than there is in live theater. I think live theater is magnificent. And there's this, experience where there's no innate, accurate representation of the value of things related to the cash. And they're incredibly gifted healing practitioners who do magnificent work, who really struggle financially, and then ones who are really effective business people who are making a really good living. And it's not a reflection of whether their work is better or worse, but it's a certain amount of there being a skill set to convey the value of what you do in a way that is successful, with people being available to make an energy exchange for your time and talent for money in a way that's really sustainable. And that's not a question of not knowing your value or somehow if you had better self-esteem, you'd be paid more. It's a really concrete skill set that says, how do I make good deals with the energy that I exchange? And, for example, I knit, I sew, I do all these handcrafts, and I just don't try to sell them because no one would ever buy them for anything remotely like the work that I put into them. I do them because I love them. I gift them to people who hopefully will value them and be delighted with them. But just because there isn't a monetized aspect of life doesn't mean that essential creativity isn't really important. Elizabeth Gilbert says it more beautifully than I ever could imagine saying it in her book, Big Magic. So that's a great source to look for this idea of the merits of living a creative life, even when there isn't a direct financial incentive. And so this concept of happiness and fulfillment and a life well lived and love and connection and soul purpose, a lot of those things are completely independent of money. And it is good to have a foundation. Like I'm all for not putting yourself in the incredible stress state of not having enough financial resources. If you don't have enough financial resources, it's a good problem to focus on solving first. Like if a man is trying to date me and his finances are a mess and he's, on the edge of being homeless, I won't date him because I don't want to save him. And it would be really hard if my heart was in with him to have him suffering. And frankly, I don't think he should be taking time away from figuring out how he's going to address his situation to build the kind of nuanced, sophisticated relationship I would like to have. So that's just something I tend in my life. Like if I'm struggling with money, it's probably not a moment where I'm going to give attention to dating. And, not that I end relationships if I'm in a financial quandary, but there's merit to solving that first, but there's also incredible merit to looking at all these different things. And I think when people are in a pain place, the pain place around money can become like this catch-all bucket for everything they're unhappy about. And it's easy to believe if I had way more money, I would be happier. And the cool thing is we can do research on humans. We have a lot of data about that. And what the data tells us is absolutely, if you are in poverty, having more money will make you appreciably happier. So poverty bad, good to be out of poverty. But there's a certain point where after you achieve this amount of money, more money has no correlation to improved happiness. There's just zero correlation. Your income goes up, your happiness bounces all over the place. So there isn't a correlation past a certain point where more money is going to result in more happiness. And it feels like it's true. I mean, I feel like if I won the lottery, I'd be way, way, way happier. But I'm also willing to concede the evidence-based kind of thing of looking at actual lottery winners who are generally speaking more unhappy and often end up in more dire financial circumstances. So the evidence suggests that while I feel like I'm special and different and, unlimited resources would make me happy, I think there's a much more modest level of amount of resources that would tap out how much money is going to contribute to my happiness. And so it's kind of nice because it could be much more attainable to say, okay, here's the number that I really need in order to be good, to have enough for my basic bills without struggle, to be able to have experiences I want in life, to take a trip occasionally if that's something that you care about, whatever it is, to be in non-struggle. But one of the ways we can powerfully work with this is divorcing these stress thoughts and these money thoughts from other issues in our lives, because you can address a lot of things in parallel. If you don't have an emergency money situation, but you're just wanting to build, you can work on that, and you can work on communication, which could enhance relationships, which could make you feel less lonely. And you could be, working in therapy to dismantle some of the negative self-talk that you do, or some of the ways that you're not kind to yourself. Like there are all these things that you could be addressing. And I think that this concept of I'd be happier if I had more money gets in the way of people really sitting down with themselves and saying, where could my life be better? Where could my life improve? And sort of breaking those apart. And even if you're biased toward the upper chakras, moving energy vibrantly and well in other chakras is supportive for the root chakra. So if you have a really healthy chakra system and an underdeveloped root system, then the good is a lot easier to move down and to help develop that part. So if you're functioning really well in life and have a lot of satisfaction and happiness, addressing this particular area is going to come a lot easier. And this can apply to areas besides money. There are people who think, oh, if I just lost weight, everything would be better in my life. Or, oh, if I was just prettier. Or, oh, if I could have that plastic surgery and change this thing I really don't like about my body. or if I could just, have the relationship that I want. I've been in good relationships and I've been in not good relationships and I've been single. Sometimes people think if I could have my dream job, and I do have my dream job, and I still have mornings where I wake up grumpy with the world and moody for no really good reason. And I love my dream job, and if I'm in a good relationship, that's wonderful. And yet it's kind of that everywhere you go, there you are. And so even when these circumstances change, there's still the whole complexity of life. So I haven't noticed that, happily married people suddenly have absolutely nothing to talk to me about in a soul retrieval of how they would like to shift and change their lives. They're like, no, I have enough money and I have my sweetie pie locked in. I'm totally good in life. And so the invitation, money is a really big place that this comes up, but I just want to offer an invitation to see if there's any area where you're saying, if this circumstance was different, all these other things would be different, because that's kind of a version of magical thinking, and it limits your ability to move forward on a destiny path because you don't work things in parallel. And for sure, again, if you really need to address a particular situation, you can put focused energy on it. I'm not adverse to saying, this is the thing I want to do. I had a very unbalanced life building my practice and writing my books because I was so passionate about it. So I gave up a lot of social engagements and activities that I would have loved to have been a part of. I used to do tabletop role-playing games, and I used to be really involved in the SCA, which is the Society for Creative Anachronism. And as I got rocking and rolling on my business, I reduced my participation in those because I was more passionate about the business, and it just took a lot of time. Nobody taught me to be an entrepreneur. I figured a lot of stuff out the hard way. There are courses and classes that can teach you how to do it more easily and elegantly, but I figured it out on my own. So that took a lot of time early on. And so I'm not adverse to really going deep with something you're really committed to, but sometimes people aren't even taking action on the thing that they want to be different, and they're just sort of stewing in the I wish, I wish, I wish. And our mind creates these neural pathways that just become repetitive thoughts, and there's this recapitulation of just going round and round with an untruth thought that sort of robs us of the ability to effectively eagle-eye our situation, see what's true about our situation, and make good strategic changes to improve our quality of life. So the invitation is to, do a little introspection and see if you can ferret things out, because you might want to be on an upward spiral and trajectory with your financial security and well-being if it's good enough, but there's some ways that you still feel really vulnerable and you want to be working on that. But you could also be working on all the other areas that feel like they would magically be resolved if there was more money, but humans aren't real reliable about knowing what the relationship is between money and happiness. And so I invite you to, dig a little deeper and kind of check in with yourself and see if any of this fits, or there's a way that you can find it within yourself. Thank you so much for joining me. To learn more about me and my work, please visit my website at handsoverheart.com. There you can join my mailing list for access to free bonus content in the members-only area. If you've enjoyed this, please consider subscribing and leaving a review. It would help me out a lot. Also, a special thank you to my patrons for your support. You offer me the time freedom to work on passion projects like this one. If you'd like to receive personal shamanic support from me and my team of guides, please consider joining my Patreon community. You'll find the link below. And again, thank you so much for listening. This is Katie Weatherup, wishing you wholeness and happiness.